The birth of radio happened well over a century ago. In the 1860s, James Clerk Maxwell is credited with predicting the existence of radio waves. Flash forward to 1895, and Marconi is given credit for broadcasting one of the first radio signals or transmissions, sending and receiving a transmission. And flash forward another 100 years, and radio is thriving by the early and mid 1990s. Radio had become many things in that century. And one of those things was a business. The business of AM and FM news talk radio really flourished with the advent of the car and certainly with personal listening devices that we kind of took for granted in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Today, radio is experiencing another digital transformation, and it's far from dead. Radio has been augmented by other technologies like podcasting, social media, YouTube, and video, but radio listeners are still very passionate, and there is still a lot of advertising revenue in radio. But advertising is not the only revenue model, and technology will continue to adapt the medium. For Tech Republic and ZDNet, my name is Dan Patterson, and it's a pleasure today to speak with Michael Harrison. He is the publisher of Talkers Magazine and the host of Up Close and Far Out with Michael Harrison, a long-form interview program where he talks to luminaries throughout the media. Michael, it's a pleasure to speak with you today. I know you and I have known each other for a long time, and I've learned a lot about radio from you. I wonder if you could provide a little bit of background about Talkers is kind of the Bible. It is the trade magazine for the talk radio industry, and you host a conference every year with luminaries from talk radio to talk about the business and industry. And I wonder if you could give us a little précis of a history, of a background of how the radio business has evolved.
Well, Talkers is the core of Talkers readership is talk radio, but there is no one thing called talk radio anymore. And because talk radio has such a major presence in the radio world, we've evolved into kind of a talk media publication and a radio publication. We cover all radio now. And talk radio has been the driving force, I think, that's kept radio alive into the 90s and into the 21st century. And here we are now, 17% of the way into the 21st century. It's kind of wild to think about that. Radio, talk radio, well, radio in general has always been a new medium. It was the original Wi-Fi. Everything that we consider to be part of the wired internet has a radio component. If it wasn't for radio, the entire internet would be inoperable. GPS, I mean, everything in the digital age still uses those electromagnetic vibrations that go through the air. So when we talk about radio from a standpoint of AM and FM and DJs and talk show hosts and turning on the device and hearing things we like, I think in 2017 we have to look at that medium as a state of mind, as opposed to necessarily a literal, box that's on the table that's licensed by the government. That paradigm is in its fading days, and it's not going to come back. It'll be around for a while, but I personally think most radio listening, even now, a lot of people would argue this, but I'm pretty sure of it. Most radio listening is online. Even radio stations, people are listening on their smartphones, they're listening on their computers. AM radio, although it still has a large audience, the AM dial is very staticky and really doesn't work well in this new environment. So I'd say that podcasting, even this program that you and I are doing right now, in my mind, is a radio show. It's just a 21st century digital era radio show, and radio shows no longer have to be 4-hour blocks and 3-hour blocks from the top of the hour to the bottom of the hour to the top of the hour where the news is. They could be 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 8 minutes, 15 minutes, 4 hours, 10 hours. And on demand is the element that has really changed everything.
I could not more strongly agree. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about how the economics of the business have shifted as well. Is it still advertising? Is it a combination of advertising and distribution? How do new radio networks monetize the content?
Most radio is still monetized by advertising, but advertising is no longer the only way to go. Many radio stations, radio shows supplement their advertising income by selling stuff directly to the audience, where they actually have their own product lines. And of course, in order to be successful at that, you have to have a critical mass of listeners. And the other element in the equation is you have to have a loyalty factor. People have to really believe in the host or the program and be zealous about the subject. If that's the case, you could sell anything from, mugs and t-shirts to health supplements, and all kinds of products are being sold. That's the major way that radio functions, is through direct sale, direct marketing, and advertising. The digital age has made it difficult for all media that sells advertising to evolve into the new business model, because, and I guess that part of it is psychological, part of it is habits, how people consume the media, but it's much more difficult to sell advertising for the same amount of money. It's reduced. You get far less income, like dimes to dollars, in terms of selling digital advertising. And we haven't really come up with a way yet to comfortably embed advertising into the digital space. It's very obtrusive. It's annoying. It'll say this ad ends, to skip this ad, click here. There's a lot of clickbait. People are becoming wise to the fact that some of these ads are bogus and in some cases even dangerous in terms of viruses. And it's just a mess. So it's the Wild West. And this has been a problem for an industry that has been around for, almost 100 years, selling 60-second spots, 30-second spots, programs that are sponsored in a very formal and stable way. It's just wreaked havoc on it. And that's where the problem lies, in monetizing the media. The audiences are still there. The other problem facing radio, obviously, is the tremendous debt that was accrued in the 90s and the early years of the 21st century to buy radio stations, which no longer have the viability or future as commodities that they used to. If it weren't for the debt, radio is still a very viable business. Lots of people listen to it. It still is very convenient. It's very entertaining. It's a part of the culture. Some of the biggest newsmakers and names in the media today are radio talent. So radio's alive in that regard. But between the economic problems of consolidation and debt and the difficulty in selling advertising, it's been a difficult transformation to be a viable 21st century business.
It's interesting. One of the core components that you just mentioned there was a zealotry that the audience needs to feel in order to really have a successful program or a successful host or a successful network. There needs to be an emotional buy-in. And that model, I remember from my days in radio that a live read by the host had a significantly higher CPM, that's cost per thousand, than a spot that you would drop in, a 30-second or, like you mentioned, 60-second spot, because the host was a component of that advertisement, which is very similar to what we see today. A live read by a host in a podcast will carry a much higher CPM because the audience is really dialed in. They have an emotional buy-in. That endorsement is significant. So I wonder, we are in an age of massive narrowcasting, where there are a lot of hosts doing things very well, but maybe with a different type or different size of audience. Michael, I wonder if there are hosts or networks or producers that are doing digital really well, that in your estimation, if you look around with your expertise and say, they get it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the name that comes to mind, who was the forefather of this, he's certainly controversial. And when I say his name, a lot of people are going to go, but because of the emotion that his very name, creates in people. But that's Alex Jones. Alex Jones has made millions and millions of dollars operating independently online with a program that has millions of devoted fans. There are many people out there that do it. The key is you've got to target an audience that is underserved and that is very emotional and passionate about a particular topic. And then you have to gain credibility with them and have them believe that you're on a mission. Whether that's true or not, now we're getting into psychology. I don't know what these people are thinking. People always ask me, is Rush Limbaugh sincere? And I say, hey, I'm not his shrink. I don't know. How do we know? I mean, if there's one thing we've learned in the media is you cannot judge a book by its cover, whether it's a movie actor, a politician, or a talk show host. Look at the stuff that's going on right now with all the revelations about sexual misconduct. I mean, it's like, him? Oh my gosh. So, but if it comes across, if it seems sincere and people buy into that, that is a key component to being able to make a living. You can't just call it in anymore. Gone are the days of media being a big compromise, where it's not really anybody's specific cup of tea, but it's the only thing we have and we'll go along with it. And for many, many, many decades, a lot of programming on radio and television was just fluff, filler between the commercial breaks. And people didn't know better. But now people know better. They can find something out there, video, audio, podcasting, on the internet, all of these pay channels, all of these special services, making movies that are, putting the Hollywood out of business in terms of the old studio system for movie theaters. Look at those changes. You can't just call it in. Everything has to be really, really pertinent and good and credible, and people believe in it. So the good news about the digital age is it's democratized. Anybody can make a movie and distribute it to the world. I mean, anybody can do anything, write a book. There's no limits to getting in. But the bad news for everybody who wants to do that is everybody else is doing it too. So the quality to stand out in this noisy world on every level of measure, credibility and pertinence, and just engaging an audience, the bar has never been higher.
Those are wise words from Michael Harrison. He is the publisher of Talkers Magazine and the host of Up Close and Far Out with Michael Harrison. Michael, I wonder if you could leave us with a forecast of the next, say, 12, 18, 36 months. Where is radio headed? Podcasting was nothing new in 2006 and 2010, and it took until 2014 or so for the medium to really break into the mainstream. What's next for radio and for talk radio?
Well, as talk radio goes, so will radio go. I don't know what the future of music radio is. I don't believe in it. I think that day is over. I don't believe there's much of a future for music radio. As far as talk radio is concerned, it is the future of radio. All different kinds of talk. I think you'll see a broadening out of more topics being talked about. It won't just be news talk, politics, and sports. There'll be all kinds of radio. And of course, I have to tip my hat to public radio, that they do a very good job as well. I think the first thing that's going to make a difference in the next 36 months is how the current financial crisis plays out. Two of the biggest companies are going through bankruptcy and potential bankruptcy. So we might see selling of assets. We might see more people in the game, smaller companies, more diversity. I hope that happens. I don't wish any company bankruptcy or harm, but I'm looking at the silver lining in that cloud, and that is it might turn out to be a renaissance for radio. Beyond that, I see the augmented platforms, podcasting, and other projects that are online augmenting the linear format of radio being one channel 24 hours a day of succession of programs that are not on demand. On demand, augmented programming, podcasting, specials, community outreach. I see that as being where radio really accelerates that progress in the next 36 months and beyond.